pretty atrocious conditions as well.
OK, Jonah Fisher in Jerusalem, thank you very much. Well, now let's speak to Daniel Levy, president of the US Middle East Project and a former advisor to Israel's government. Welcome to the programme. Let me start by getting your thoughts and reaction to that news that's just come into us about that drone which has been launched towards Benjamin Netanyahu's home in northern Israel. What are your thoughts on that?
Yes, and I understand confirmation that it struck the home. The response is that the attempts to depict the resistance movements, whether in Lebanon or in Gaza, as having now been incapacitated, are clearly incorrect, and they're incorrect for a reason, which is that if we understand this through the prism of, well, it's just terror, then we fail to understand that as long as occupation and illegal actions are taken against the people of Palestine or Lebanon, for that matter, you are going to have these movements rooted in the objective conditions of their people and popular with their people. So the killing of Sinwar, the killing of Nasrallah doesn't end this. A political horizon would end this, but there isn't one. And Netanyahu makes sure that there isn't one. Unfortunately, at the same time, we have the news out of northern Gaza, which you shared, and you can't verify it because your journalists aren't allowed in there. And the local journalists who can report on this are being killed. 175 Palestinian journalists killed by Israel since the start of this.
Daniel, from the Israeli government's perspective, they would say that they are trying to eliminate the capabilities of Hamas and Hezbollah, and we saw those scenes of celebrations in Israel after news of Yahya Sinwar's death became confirmed. What is the next strategy then in terms of the Israeli government's goal to eliminate Hamas and Hezbollah? Because, of course, that comes against the balance of more civilian casualties, as we saw today as well in Jabalia in Gaza.
Yeah, and look, from a human perspective, one can understand the celebrations in Israel. The crimes of October 7th were crimes, they were reprehensible, but one can only understand that this is not a war against Sinwar or Hamas if one adds a bit of context, because without that, we can't know what is going on or what will happen next. And the reason Palestinians in Gaza live in refugee camps is that they were ethnically cleansed by Israel at its formation, never allowed to return home. Then those who still remain live under a military government for 20 years. Then there's been more than half a century of occupation of all the Palestinian lands, displacement, blockades, immiseration, illegal settlements, a system that is separate and unequal, defined as apartheid by blue-chip human rights groups and by the International Court of Justice. That's all before October 7th. Netanyahu has not been at war with Hamas and Sinwar since then. He's been at war with the Palestinian people, also in the West Bank, destroying everything, more than 40,000 dead, more than 15,000 children, schools, hospitals, aid workers. We cannot deal with this until we understand that you can never have security, also not for Israeli Jews, certainly not for Palestinians, alongside structural violence and occupation, because those things never go together. So we need to step back and actually say, how do we change the Israeli incentive structure so we can get out of this cycle of violence, which will continue as long as Palestinians have their rights denied? This isn't about a terror group and a normal state. This is about a permanent occupation and a resistance, both of which use violations of international law, which is why the chief prosecutor of the International Criminal Court has a request for an arrest warrant against Prime Minister Netanyahu.
OK, Daniel Levy, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts and perspectives. Former advisor to the Israeli government and now president of the US Middle East Project.